The wind carries nothing but silence across the ancient valley. No birds sing here. No insects buzz through the stagnant air. Even the earth itself seems to hold its breath, as if afraid to disturb what lies beneath. Dr. Sarah Chen kneels in the red dirt, her brush moving with surgical precision across something that shouldn't exist. The bone emerges slowly from its earthen tomb, yellowed, ancient, marked by time itself. But as the centuries of dust fall away, something else becomes visible, something that makes her hands tremble. Teeth marks, human teeth marks. The femur bone bears the unmistakable grooves of human incisors, canines that once belonged to someone who walked upright, who built fires, who perhaps even loved and laughed. Someone who in their final moments became both predator and prey in humanity's darkest hour. "These aren't animal bites," Dr. Chen whispers to her colleague, though the words seem to echo louder than they should in this cursed place. "These are human." Around them, the excavation site stretches like an open wound in the earth. Dozens of bones lie scattered in the red soil, femurs, ribs, skulls, all bearing the same horrific signature, all telling the same impossible story. This is not a battlefield. This is not a burial ground. This is something far more sinister, a dining hall from hell itself, where the ancient world's most taboo act became a matter of survival. Where human beings crossed a line that should never be crossed, and in doing so, revealed the monster that lurks within us all. The question hangs in the stagnant air like a funeral shroud. What drives a human being to consume another? What horror could be so complete, so overwhelming, that it transforms civilized people into something unrecognizable? As the sun begins to set over the valley, casting long shadows across the bone-strewn earth, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. This is not an isolated incident. This is not madness. This is evidence of something far more organized, far more calculated. This is proof of humanity's first war, not fought for territory, not for resources, not for ideology. This was a war fought for flesh itself. 15,000 years ago, the world was dying. Picture a landscape locked in ice, where winter never ends and spring becomes nothing more than a distant memory, passed down through increasingly desperate generations. The great glaciers stretch across continents like frozen graveyards, crushing everything beneath their inexorable advance. Where once fertile plains supported thriving communities, now only wind-scoured wasteland remains. The mammoth herds, those giants that had sustained entire tribes for millennia, begin their final migration south, following instincts older than human memory. Their thunderous footsteps grow fainter each day, until eventually even their echoes fade into silence. The reindeer follow. The elk disappear. One by one, the great herds abandon the frozen north, leaving behind only the most dangerous predator of all, desperate humans. In makeshift shelters carved from ice and stone, tribal elders gather around dying fires, their faces gaunt with hunger, their eyes hollow with a knowledge too terrible to speak aloud. The food stores, carefully rationed, desperately conserved, dwindle to nothing. Children cry themselves to sleep with empty bellies. Adults stare into the flames and see their own deaths reflected in the dancing light. At first, they eat the leather from their shoes, their clothing, anything that might provide even the smallest amount of nourishment. They boil bones again and again until even the marrow is exhausted. They scrape bark from the few trees that still stand, grind it into powder, and try to convince themselves it tastes like food. But hunger is a living thing. It grows inside them, consuming reason, devouring morality, until nothing remains but the most basic, most primitive instinct: survive. The first death comes naturally. An elderly woman, weakened by weeks of starvation, simply doesn't wake up one morning. Her family mourns, but the mourning doesn't last long. Not when her body represents salvation. Not when it means their children might live another day. The decision is made in whispered conversations around dimming fires. Not spoken aloud, never spoken aloud, but understood with the terrible clarity that only true desperation can bring. They are no longer people. They are animals. And animals do what they must to survive. The transformation begins slowly, almost imperceptibly. Hunting parties venture out not to track game, there is no game, but to watch other camps, other families, sizing them up with eyes that have forgotten how to see other humans as anything more than meat. Tribal boundaries blur and disappear. Ancient alliances crumble like ice in spring. The social contracts that once bound communities together become meaningless in the face of starvation. Trust becomes a luxury no one can afford. When the first raiding party returns with their grisly bounty, nobody asks questions. Nobody wants to know whose family provided their salvation. They simply eat and try not to think about the taste, try not to acknowledge what they've become. But the hunger never truly ends. It only grows stronger, more demanding, more patient. And with each passing day, the line between civilization and savagery becomes thinner, until eventually, it disappears altogether. The wars of flesh have begun. The first strike happens at dawn, when the target camp is still heavy with sleep, unaware of what's coming. The attackers move like shadows over the frozen ground, their faces marked with ash and earth, their eyes showing nothing familiar or kind. They are no longer the farmers, the makers, the storytellers they once were. Hunger has stripped away everything gentle, leaving behind only the hunter. They attack without a sound, without mercy, because mercy is a gift they can no longer afford. The ancient ground tells this story through bones and tools. At a site in England known as Gough's Cave, researchers uncover the remains of a family, men, women, and children, all bearing clear marks of organized cutting. Every sign points not to panic but to precision, a grim kind of skill born from survival. These are not random acts of hunger. This is conflict. This is strategy. This is the reshaping of humanity itself. In the caves of Krapina, Croatia, explorers find scattered remains of many individuals, bones split to reach what was inside, skulls opened with deliberate blows. It wasn't a single tragedy, but a repeating pattern, generations living and enduring through the same act. Across the world, the same story unfolds. In Africa, sites reveal fire marks and bone cuts, proof of what was cooked and shared. In Asia, mass resting places show not burials but something far darker. The remains left as waste, not tribute. Each discovery adds another piece to a puzzle too disturbing to imagine, yet too real to dismiss. This was not madness. This was a system, a method, a way of life. Tribal conflict changed forever. Victory no longer meant land or tools. It all meant survival through any means. Enemy camps became hunting. Grounds and settlements turned from homes into sources of life. Children were taught to see strangers not as allies, but as danger, as prey. Weapons evolved too. Spears and arrows once made for wild beasts were reshaped for human targets. Stone blades grew sharper, perfect for cutting with precision. Tools that once carved art now divided life itself. Groups began sending scouts to observe other camps, counting people, studying their defenses, deciding which ones could be taken. It was no longer the thinking of hunters, it was the planning of predators. Some learned to strike from the shadows. Others trapped their rivals by blocking paths, waiting for hunger to weaken them. Many became wanderers, striking, vanishing, and leaving only emptiness behind. Even language began to change. Words for neighbor and stranger took on darker tones. Everyday speech gained new meanings, hints of what could not be spoken aloud. Children grew up hearing lullabies that warned them about the monsters outside, never realizing that they had already become those monsters. Winter turned into the season of fear, when escape was impossible. Spring revealed the aftermath, the frozen ground melting to expose what was left behind. These wars spread across lands and ages, transforming entire tribes into something unrecognizable to their ancestors. This is not a story of victory. This is a story of what happens when survival erases humanity itself. And the most haunting part? The evidence shows, and it worked. Those who did this survived, and from them came us. Deep beneath the peaceful English countryside, Gough's Cave holds secrets that would make the living weep. When researchers first descended into its limestone chambers, they expected to find the usual archaeological treasures, pottery shards, stone tools, perhaps the remains of ancient hearths. Instead, they found hell. The bones tell their story in a language older than words. Human skulls carefully cleaned and shaped into bowls, femurs with the ends smashed off to extract every last drop of marrow, ribs bearing the precise cut marks of stone knives, scraped clean with an efficiency that speaks of long practice. Dr. Sylvia Bellow's hands shake as she examines the evidence under laboratory lights. Each bone fragment represents not just death, but systematic, methodical butchery. These are not the panicked scratches of desperate survivors. These are the careful, practiced cuts of people who had perfected the art of human consumption. "Look at this," she whispers to her colleague, pointing to a skull cap that has been meticulously shaped. This wasn't just food. This was functional. They made tools from the bones, cups from the skulls. They used every part. The carbon dating reveals an even more disturbing truth. This wasn't a single incident of desperate cannibalism. The site was occupied repeatedly over thousands of years. Generations of people returned to this place, drawn by some dark knowledge that made it ideal for their horrific purposes. Across the English Channel, the German site of Herxheim presents an even more systematic horror. Excavators have uncovered the remains of nearly 500 individuals, all showing signs of careful dismemberment. But this wasn't random butchery. The bones show evidence of specific techniques, almost ritualistic in their precision. The patterns are too consistent to be accidental, explains Dr. Andrea Z. Blance, her voice barely above a whisper, as she studies the endless rows of cataloged bone fragments. Whoever did this had rules, methods. This was an industry. The skulls from Herxheim reveal another chilling detail. Many show signs of having been skinned while the victims were still alive. The cut marks are too precise, too clean to have been made post-mortem. These people didn't just kill their victims. They processed them like livestock. But perhaps most disturbing of all is what the bones reveal about the victims themselves. Men, women, children, elderly, entire family groups processed together with mechanical efficiency. Some of the remains show signs of having been kept alive for extended periods, their bones bearing the marks of healed injuries that would have required careful medical attention. They were being farmed. In France, the cave site of Fontbrégois yields similar evidence, but with a twist that makes the horror even more personal. The human remains are found mixed with animal bones, processed in exactly the same way. To these ancient people, there was no distinction between human flesh and venison. Meat was meat. The Spanish site of Grandolina reveals evidence of systematic cannibalism dating back 800,000 years, suggesting that this behavior is not an aberration but a fundamental part of human nature. The bones show the same careful processing, the same efficient extraction of every possible calorie. Modern forensic techniques reveal details that the original excavators never imagined. Chemical analysis of the bones shows not just that they were cooked, but how they were cooked. Roasted over open fires, boiled in primitive cauldrons, even smoked for preservation, these people had developed cuisine around human flesh. Microscopic analysis reveals another disturbing truth. Many of the bones show evidence of multiple processing events. They were cooked, consumed, then the remains were broken down further to extract marrow, then crushed to powder to be mixed with other foods. Nothing was wasted. The evidence extends far beyond Europe. Sites in Africa, Asia, and the Americas all show similar patterns, suggesting that cannibalistic warfare was not a regional aberration, but a global phenomenon. Wherever humans faced extreme environmental pressure, they turned to the same solution. And perhaps most chilling of all, the evidence suggests these weren't desperate people making desperate choices. The tool assemblages found at these sites are sophisticated, the settlement patterns complex. These were organized societies that had simply made different choices about what constituted acceptable behavior. They built their entire civilizations around the consumption of human flesh. And they thrived. In the trembling glow of torchlight, a sacred ceremony begins. But this is no ordinary ritual. The participants gather in a circle around what was once a person, their faces painted with ancient symbols, signs of knowledge, carried through countless generations. The change from desperate survival to sacred belief did not happen in a single night. It crept slowly into the human mind, like smoke drifting through the air, turning what was once an unthinkable act into something holy, something divine. When survival demanded the unspoken, the human spirit reshaped its meaning, and from that reshaping came something far more powerful than need: devotion. Among certain early tribes, consuming the remains of the departed became a way to honor them. The body of a fallen warrior was shared among the living, not as food, but as a path to carry the person's courage, their strength, their essence forward. Death became transformation, a way for the spirit of the lost to live on within the tribe forever. Over time, the ritual grew more complex. Specific parts of the body took on spiritual meaning. The heart was believed to hold bravery, the mind, wisdom, the hands, skill. What began as an act of survival slowly evolved into a sacred form of spiritual union. In some communities, the practice reached even further. Elders, when they felt their time near, would willingly offer themselves to sustain the younger, not as victims, but as givers of life, leaving behind not just memories but nourishment. It was seen as the final act of love, becoming part of their own people forever. Archaeological findings hint at these meanings. At certain sites, remains show deliberate preparation, bones carefully arranged in meaningful patterns, suggesting ritual rather than violence. Specially shaped tools found there appear crafted only for this sacred purpose. Ancient wall paintings, faint and rare, show figures performing what appears to be ceremonial sharing of the human form. The people are depicted not as savages, but as worshippers, guided, organized, devoted. These were not scenes of madness, but of faith, even more unsettling. Some evidence suggests that these beliefs grew into myths. Stories passed by word of mouth told of spirit beings, divine forces that demanded offerings not as punishment, but as sustenance. They were not gods of anger. They were gods of hunger. The boundary between worship and nourishment blurred until it disappeared entirely. Children were born into worlds where the act of sharing human essence was sacred, a communion that united their people in ways no other act. Could they learn songs of gratitude, prayers of offering, chants of remembrance, all meant to honor those who became one with them. Some tribes even built hierarchies around it. There were chosen preparers, holy keepers trained to handle the remains with sacred care. There were tasters, selected to sense which parts carried the greatest blessing or power. Everything had meaning. Nothing was done without ritual. And perhaps the most haunting thought of all, what if these traditions never truly vanished? What if they simply hid beneath new symbols, new faiths, new names? In quiet corners of the world, certain rituals still echo faintly. Funeral customs that use the ashes of the dead, ceremonies that symbolically consume the spirit of ancestors. The question that troubles every researcher who studies this evidence is both simple and terrifying. What if hunger was never the true reason? What if the act was never about survival but about connection, something deep and ancient within us? What if humanity didn't evolve beyond these practices, but simply learned to disguise them? In silent moments, the archaeologists sit alone with their thoughts, their findings, and their fears. And sometimes they wonder, did the cult of the sacred feast ever truly end? Or did it just learn to wear a different face? The story begins in the mountains of Papua New Guinea. A strange disease appears among the Fore tribe. They call it Kuru, the laughing death. People who suffer from it lose control of their bodies. They start to laugh, even as their minds and strength fade away. But behind that laughter hides something dark. Dr. Carlton, a medical researcher, studies the strange illness. Every report he reads says the same thing. The cause is not a virus. It is not a normal infection. It is something far more disturbing. The disease spreads when people eat the flesh or brain of another human being. The truth hits him hard. This means people have been eating each other, not just in rare times of hunger, but often for generations. So often that our bodies began to change. Our very blood remembers it. Evolution only reacts to something that happens again and again. And so, our DNA learned to protect us from the sickness that comes when humans eat humans. Years later, another scientist, Dr. John Collins, finds more proof. He discovers that some people carry a special gene. This gene protects them from brain diseases linked to human flesh, and that gene is found only in people whose ancestors once practiced cannibalism. The evidence is inside us, written in our cells. Even more shocking, these changes are ancient. They didn't appear recently. They came thousands of years ago, which means cannibalism was not a rare act. It was part of human life for a very long time. Some scientists also found signs of protection against bacteria from rotting flesh. That means early humans didn't just eat fresh meat, they ate it even after it started to decay, and our bodies learned to fight the sickness that came with it. Modern brain scans reveal something even more unsettling. When people see pain or fear, the same parts of the brain light up as when we see food. It means deep inside, in our oldest instincts, that ancient hunger still exists. Silent, hidden. Maybe our horror of cannibalism today is not evolution, but culture trying to bury something older, something that once helped our ancestors survive. The bones in ancient graves tell the same story. Those cuts, those fire marks, those remains. They are not signs of madness. They are proof of what we once were. We are all descendants of those people. We carry their memories in our blood, and maybe deep inside, that hunger never truly went away.